Funny enough, I have a conversation starter here that intersects both of you's cultures. One is about guns, which is JT's culture, and the other one is about hospitals, which is Hakim's culture.
You didn't. You shot up a hospital.
Almost. I almost got there. Trust me. But then I remember this podcast has patrons. I have, some leftover money, so I went with the direction of corruption. Now everybody's confused. What the fuck is he talking about? Every 5 years, anybody who has a gun license here, which is already a relatively difficult thing to do, one which I do have, every 5 years you need to go for a medical checkup, which in my opinion is a perfectly legitimate thing to request from someone who has a thing that catches on fire and shoots a fucking missile out of it. So I went there, and obviously all the criticisms coming in from our Western friends about public healthcare being extremely slow and shit were actually incorrect. But I ended up going there exactly at a time when a bunch of students that just graduated from driving school, now 18, not 12, the way they are allowed to be in the US, they had to go through, the same doctors as me. And after I waited for 20-30 minutes, I considered going the American route, because you have to understand that JT is like one of my angels on one of my shoulder, and Hakim is the other angel. And sometimes they turn into the devil or the angel. They influence my life profoundly. So there I could have gone the JT American route and violently point my gun at people so that they move out of the queue so I can get my eyes checked, go to a neuropsychiatrist, get my hearing checked, my heart rate, etc., etc. But I chose to go with the Iraqi/Hakim way, which is basically go to the first doctor and give him $50 so that he helps me go through the whole process much quicker. He literally smiled from one ear to another, grabbed me by the hand, and literally cut me in front of all of the normal people who... I don't feel bad because there was no old people there and nobody was hurt. These were just literally kids waiting to get their fucking driver's licenses. And I was like, I'm getting a gun license, much higher level than this fucking shit. And then he just walked me around all the spots. I even bragged for a second. I'm like, one of my best friends is a doctor, actually. Thank you, sir, so much. So I guess in this circumstance, the little angel on my right, Hakim's voice overtook this. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. It would be headlines. This is why we should permanently ban guns. Guy waiting for a gun medical checkup actually uses gun because he cannot wait for checkup. It would be a pretty decent headline. I would click on that shit.
Well, you taught all those kids a very valuable lesson about how to get ahead in life.
Yeah, that's true. But I was gonna say, there's a weird parallel in my own life. When I got my driver's license, I had to do a stupid medical fucking thing as well, like a checkup, if you could even call it that. And I was like, you know what? I don't even want to do this. So I just slipped the doctor. I was a student at the time, medical student. I just slipped the doctor $20, and I was the equivalent of $20. And I was like, can you just sign the paper?
There you go. I'm not the only one.
And he did it. And he went. It's like, dude, I know. I see fine. I hear fine. Okay, I don't need this. I'm not gonna waste half an hour of my time on this shit.
And all of them, because it was a gun, all of them were relatively serious. They were like, but you already got the license. You're just getting checked up. You didn't lose your shit. No, but I kind of had to lie because they were like, do you smoke? Are you violent? And I was like, yeah. Do you drink? And I was like, yeah. But I was like, no, of course not. And they're like, okay, here you go. Nice. Thank you.
Are you a political extremist?
Thankfully, didn't ask that one.
Have you? Are you, or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party? Oh my god, dude! They asked a friend of mine that when he went to the U.S. I cannot believe that they still ask people this shit.
Oh yeah,
you're
absolutely.
supposed to. Apparently, when you do the visa, I've never applied for an American visa, but apparently, what you get a form that you're supposed to fill in, and one of the questions is, have you ever been a member of a communist party? Why is that relevant? No, genuinely, this is not the fucking Cold War anymore. What the fuck?
Well, communists still can't run for office here. Yeah, open communists cannot run for office.
Oh yeah. Oh no, but it's a complete democracy. Yeah. It's fully fledged and what's it called? Full-bodied democracy.
Nazis can run for office. They're not stopping them.
Yeah, it doesn't. Democrat, Nazi, what's the difference? They both want to bomb brown people.
Yeah,
But yeah. Speaking of this shit, where this is actually the topic today. We'll kind of delve into that. But yeah, I'm sorry. There was another interesting thing that you got, Nick. There was an invasion that you witnessed.
Oh yeah.
Oh God! So I was
the enemy at the gate.
Oh Lord! So I was traveling from one Balkan state to another, and people need to understand that from July to motherfucking September, our Ottoman brothers and sisters who have migrated either first generation, third, fourth, I don't give a fuck, all over Western Europe. I wish them all the health, all the beauty. But for some reason, these beautiful human beings never take a fucking plane back to their country to visit their relatives. So they all get in these hordes of cars and drive through the Balkans in order to get to Turkey. But you do not understand what I mean by hordes of vehicles. The waiting time on certain borders ends up being 12, 18, 20 motherfucking hours. It's super fucked up for them that have to wait in the car. It's super fucked up for other people that are passing the borders on a regular basis because of work or because they're from the other country that they're going to. And it just becomes a fucking insane mess. And it triggers us Balkan people a lot because I'm sorry, but seeing hundreds of thousands of Turks in the Balkans kind of reminds us of a whole 500-year period, right? And at one moment, I'm waiting there. I waited for like around 7 hours, which is actually pretty quick, if I may say so myself. I left home at like 2 a.m. in order for it to be that quick. And I drove from 2 a.m. and I got home at like 7 or some shit. 6, okay, it wasn't that bad. And the most fucked up thing is I couldn't even enjoy sitting in my fucking car watching some TikToks on the border because TikTok recognized my motherfucking location surrounded by millions of billions of Turkish phones, and everything that TikTok was giving me at that moment, because it thought I became Turkish all of a sudden, which, now people are going to make genetics jokes, haha,
I was
only getting, Suleiman this, Suleiman that for like 6 fucking hours. So imagine a Balkan motherfucker, again, he had nothing against Turks, but a Balkan motherfucker, 7 hours surrounded by Turks shouting at each other, with TikTok Turks shouting at him in his trying to enter his homeland. I mean, past traumas were brought up in my mind. That is all I'm saying. There is such a thing as like generational PTSD. And that really fucking happened.
Epigenetic PTSD.
Epigenetic PTSD.
Oh, fuck. Oh, fuck. I love it. Oh, Jesus Christ. As he clips the fucking the Yugo. Oh, fuck.
I don't think we didn't hear that.
Sorry, I got passionate.
It's okay. It's perfect.
Just take planes. You're lovely humans. You gave us some of the best food on planet Earth. Take planes. Please take planes.
How are they? How are they going to carry all those German goods back to Turkey?
All the
German
the big memes, and not only our Turkish brothers do this. Like all Eastern Europeans do this. A lot of people like rent a car, like a Porsche or some shit, and then they go home to show off in their village. Oh, look at how much I made it and shit. But when they stop on their first gas station and do this like diesel or petrol, they're like, I don't fucking know, man. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and NBs, to yet another episode of the Deprogram. We have prepared something really, really special for you, something very spicy, almost as spicy as the KFC I ate the other day, and almost as spicy as what my asshole felt like for the next fucking week and a half. And that is conspiracy theories, more precisely conspiracy theories which ended up being true. You would be surprised just how many of them did end up being true, which should not inspire you to listen to conspiracy theories. Please, before we begin, just a small shout out to our amazing patrons, which allow this show to happen. If you like what we do here and want to help us stay as independent and as loose-lipped as possible, you can find a Patreon link.
If you don't want to hear, if you don't want to hear Dollar Shave Club,
if you want me to make fucking like literally start the show with my ass hurts from KFC and scream at Turks, we cannot have sponsors. Okay, so Patreon it is, or like talk about real real conspiracy theories because you'll hear shit like that. Nobody would sponsor this shit, trust me.
I've got all the sponsor emails. This is a threat. If you don't give us money on Patreon, I will bring Audible to the show.
Oh my god, we're gonna have to record. We're gonna have to fucking shill some garbage fucking Harry Potter fanfiction.
Fucking deal.
Oh shit.
So with that warning out of the way, that was not us asking you to donate. That was a fucking warning, baby. I'm literally holding a gun while I'm saying this. I'm not even joking. So like, I'm naked right now with like 2 gold chains and LARPing with a fucking firearm. I don't even know why I'm doing it. Well, the air conditioning is blowing so hard in me. My nipples are harder than the fucking equator. Is the equator hard? Whatever. So
No.
we start talking about being hard about someone. We are starting this episode with one relatively mainstream conspiracy theory that a lot of people know a bit about, but maybe not in detail. And that is, if you didn't know, that the Dalai Lama themselves was actually on a CIA payroll. I'll give you a little overview of that whole situation now. So the 14th Dalai Lama, the man whose smiling face we can all see in our mind, was on the CIA payroll to the tune of around 180,000 per year, which today is around 800K for much of the 1960s. This is all according to declassified documents from the State Department. So the episode involving CIA payments to the Dalai Lama and his exile movement starts shortly after the end of World War II. Once Mao's communist revolution established itself as the commanding power there. In the context of
that little thing.
Yeah, that little thing. You know, some landlords traveled very far away.
Bye-bye.
Went to Canada. In the context of supporting this anti-communist force, all anti-communist forces throughout the world, as we all know, the CIA ended up funding them, and the Dalai Lama and his exiled group were also supported with the aim of fomenting dissent against Mao's quote-unquote regime. Gyalo Thondup, I'm sorry if I mispronounced it, was the second eldest son of the 14th Dalai Lama, and he was one of the top assets of the CIA during the entirety of the Cold War. As most of us know, after the revolution, Mao's China went on to set a foothold in Tibet, a country ran back then through a classical theocratic model. The Dalai Lama was basically on top. In order to facilitate an endless conflict and quote, and I'm literally quoting the CIA here, create a constant sore for the Reds, the CIA proceeded to set up a clandestine operation with the Tibetans, aiding financially and militarily through weapons the Tibetan resistance, quote unquote. A 1950 memorandum noted that some of the reasons stemmed from a notion of bolstered sovereignty and a motivation to forge a so-called bulwark against possible invasion by Western powers via India. However, they also believed that, and check this out, and China would use Tibet as a base of attack against India and the Middle East in the Third World War, which everybody at that time was kind of thinking would happen. So, therefore, intelligence officials sold the action as a preventative one, something that they do to this day, remember children, in case, World War III starts, shit like that. So, we know about 3 main operations. One is still unavailable to the public. It's the documents, the cases have still not been opened. But the other 2 involved training guerrillas, sending in agents, military supplies and equipment, and of course, paying for the Dalai Lama's expenses. So after the month-long Indo-Chinese War in the beginning of the 60s, the Indians also ended up helping offering a helping hand to the CIA and Dalai Lama. But after a while, when everyone except, the very religiously zealous understood that there is no victory against the Chinese, Tibet was annexed. Funny enough, the CIA stopped giving cash to the Dalai Lama at that point, but continued to funnel cash to the underground groups who still operated as anti-communist guerrillas on the territory. Around $15 million of today's worth in today's money adjusted to inflation was invested, which I don't know, you guys will comment on this later, but that doesn't sound like a lot to me for, such a relatively successful an important thing, such as creating an open wound for the Reds for so long. But yes, all that said and done, in his 1991 autobiography, Freedom in Exile, the Dalai Lama actually criticized the CIA supporting the Tibetan independence movement, saying, quote, not because the CIA, cared about Tibetan independence, but as part of their worldwide efforts to destabilize all communist governments. And in 1999, the Dalai Lama suggested that the CIA Tibetan program had been harmful to Tibet because it primarily served American interests, claiming once the American policy towards China changed, they stopped their help. The Americans had a different agenda from the one of the Tibetan people. Sounds to me like the holy man himself, in his later wiser years, realized he was just being played in a larger game of chess. What do you lovely motherfuckers think?
Yeah, there's. I mean, he's correct in saying those things, but there's one thing saying it as you're dying in your memoir, and it's another thing saying it at the time when it could actually do some good.
Yeah, no, exactly right. My favorite part about this is that when you. Both the United States officially, by the way, completely denied any support. And this is, by the way, the reason that we're going over these is because all these things are things that happened, but the United States has officially denied for decades. And then eventually when they came out and they're like, oh, yeah, actually, we did do that. And in this aspect, the U.S. government now acknowledges the fact that, yes, they did arm and support militarily and financially guerrillas in Tibet to fight against the Chinese communists and the Tibetan communists, mind you. There's a massive movement there in Tibet that was parallel to the Chinese one, or the one going on in the rest of China. But the United States government not only denied this, but to this day, if you were to ask these fucking dumbass liberals who say stupid shit like free Tibet, which, by the way, Mao already did, if you say it to these people, you're like, oh no, but the Tibetans are just peaceful Buddhists. What are you talking about? No, it's the evil Chinese that are doing this fucking Falun Gong nonsense, right?
Yeah.
But that's a story for another day. But the liberals are known for such supreme brain rot that even when the United States government officially comes out admitting the horrible shit that it does, liberals will still pretend like it doesn't happen, or will start fucking what's it called, playing defense for the fucking American government, trying to deflect away or minimize or this fucking stupid shit.
And isn't it super annoying, especially to you as a Muslim, for example, a theocratic state literally led by a religious leader, but being Buddhist, they're like, oh, these bald little Asian dudes with their little orange shit sitting around and meditating, that's absolutely acceptable. But they hear, for example, Iran, oh my God, it has a religious leader, it's also a theocratic society, and they lose their shit because they're like, oh my God, the oppression, oh my God, the destruction. It's that double standard is always very fucking beautiful to me. Let's not even get started on Saudi Arabia.
Exactly. That's not to say that there aren't criticisms of all those what's it called? I know. I'm saying this for the audience, or actually for the liberal in the wall, not for you. But you know what I mean. But otherwise, yeah, exactly right. My favorite part about that is in Tibet they were chain gang peasants, and the what's it called? It's not clergy, but I don't know what the appropriate term would be. But that layer of society lived practically as kings, while everybody else was essentially a slave meant to serve them. And something like 92% of the population was illiterate, and they were in horrific poverty. And then the Mao and the Chinese communists come, and they kind of they dismantle the system. They allow everybody, and specifically women, to enter into education, and they completely turn that society upside down. And the idiot liberals who fucking, especially back in the day, like in the 90s, when they would have their stupid concerts, trying to be, free Tibet, it's like, what do you mean? To return to that fucking garbage? Idiots. Yeah, these people are...
Tibet, similar to the way there's a very cute parallel that I like to make between Tibet and actually the Red Army in World War II. The Red Army is identified with oh my God, the Soviets killed more of their soldiers than they did Germans, etc., because mostly, yes, because of the tens of years of massive Cold War propaganda. But in my opinion, the most influential thing was the movie Enemy at the Gates. Tibet has the same thing. You most 1,000% watch it. I was brainwashed by Enemy at the Gates when I was younger, and about when it comes to Tibet, I was brainwashed by that Brad Pitt movie, White Savior Goes to Tibet.
Yeah.
7 years in Tibet. The one scene where the Maoists come into the of what the fuck you call it, the temple, and the Tibetans are painting these beautiful things on the ground with sand, and after they paint them they remove them, and the Maoists come and they sit down and they fuck up the whole painting and they start arresting all the priesthood and shit, and that shit sticks in your head. same as NKVD soldiers shooting Soviet soldiers in the face whenever they're retreating, shit like that. That sticks. That works.
Do you know what? Yeah, dude, my favorite line from Enemy at the Gates is where there's some stupid subplot where there's one female soldier and there's an officer and a male soldier, and both of them like the female soldier, but the female soldier chooses she chooses the guy, not the officer, right? Yeah. Who's supposed to be like a political officer, like a commissar. And then he goes, and then he has like this fucking heartfelt conversation. He's like, "Oh, communism is wrong because eventually, like, she loves you, she doesn't love me." Like the idea is so stupid. I don't even remember, but I remember. I don't remember exactly what he says, but it's to the tune of basically, the same shit. Like, everybody can't be equal. She loves you, and she doesn't love me. But in communism, says she's supposed to love both of us. Or some shit. Communism is poly confirmed, but
you guys are forgetting the best part of that movie, which is that everybody is British on all sides.
My God, and that
so funny.
Oh, one gun for two soldiers, and this. Oh my!
One with a rifle shoots.
Vasily himself was one of his hardcore pro-communist. Like, the dude was ideologically literate and insanely supportive of the Soviet government throughout the entirety of his life, and you can read that in his fucking memoirs. The movie goes so far as having like characters which again were either invented or were proper communists and turns them into these like hardened anti-Soviets. It's the absolute classic. And 7 years in Tibet, okay, maybe not as harsh hardcore propaganda as that, but it's the typical 90s heartfelt type of shit that they didn't really even cringe. Make with like bad intentions. In my opinion, they just wanted to make you cry and you watch it during a Sunday, and they ingested their political knowledge, which is basically reading like The Economist once a month, into the script, and you end up having garbage that poisons the well for fucking hundreds of years.
Jesus, yeah, it's absolute garbage. Liberals need to brain rot. That's what. That's all I'm gonna have to say. All right, moving swiftly on from the. Our favorite Tibet stories. There's an operation that I think a bunch of people have heard of. It's one of the more popular ones that's known of. It's called Operation Northwoods, which was, by the way, for a long time a conspiracy theory that both the Soviets and the Cubans knew about, and they spoke about it, and the United States was like, "Oh, would you listen to these evil communists that try and make something about our perfect democracy?" And well, it turns out it wasn't. It was entirely true. What it was is that the United States wanted to, and the CIA specifically wanted to stage false flag attacks on U.S. soil, on U.S. ships, on U.S. civilians, on U.S. Civilian centers and cities, by assassinations, mass shootings, bombings, etc. And then after, innocent American civilians would be killed by all this, or at least injured, they would then point the finger at Cuba and be like, "Oh, it's Cuban terrorists that caused this," and then they would use it as justification to launch a invasion. And when you read the actual transcript of the part, by the way, it's not even entirely declassified, but when you read the transcript, parts of it, they mention like the inhumanity of it. They're like, "Oh, we could blow up certain civilian centers in the United States, or we can sink ships full of Cuban refugees." I'm like, what the fuck? These are the same people who are like, "Oh, the Cubans, we love the Cuban refugees, we love them, but they're coming to seek for freedom and democracy. They're leaving the evil totalitarian dictatorship." All this fucking smoke and mirror fucking garbage talk, and then when reality sets in, you're talking about sinking ships of these people so that they drown in the fucking, right, just so that you can have some justification to bring back sugar plantations and mafia-owned fucking brothels in Havana. Jesus Christ. But anyways, there's actually not so much to say about this. There's just a lot of, what's it called? How do I even word this?
Shock value?
Yeah, the inhumanity. It's a lot. Yeah, it's just exactly. It's a lot of shock stuff, basically. Things that liberals would say this is stuff other countries do. This is not what the United States does. By the way, something I find funny as well is that one of the parts of Northwoods was the Americans would stage an attack on their own on Cuban soil, but in Guantanamo. Right, which the Americans currently occupy, and then they would blame the Cubans for the attack, and then they would use that also as justification for invasion, which I find like weirdly like funny in a twisted way, because only the United States can occupy a part of a country and then stage an attack on its own on this occupied part by themselves. They'll bomb it themselves and then use that as an excuse to take over the rest of that fucking country.
Yeah. It's interesting that, and not to get too far into like the 9/11 stuff because that goes a little off the rails, but that is what a lot of people who are 9/11 truthers point to. They point to Northwoods to say, like, look, the U.S. was planning on taking these planes and like flying them into buildings and stuff. If they were willing to do it then, why wouldn't they have done it in 2001? Stuff like that. So it's interesting. I mean, the U.S. is absolutely willing to do horrific acts against its own citizens, but it's no wonder that there are some people who believe, certain modern day conspiracy theories.
Like this specific case opened the floodgates, and a lot of people will actually use it as a counter argument to most conspiracy theories, which have been proven to an extent or not proven to an extent nowadays, by saying, okay, the fact that this was thought about it could happen, but also the other tenth, as we like to say in my part of the world, screams, this wouldn't happen because, they didn't end up following through on it. But then when you look at a lot of other operations that they ended up following through on, but not, which we'll talk about later, but which weren't against U.S. citizens, you realize that maybe the point of why they didn't do it is because Americans need to die, not because them doing false flag attacks is necessarily something that is against the core principles. That is number one. And number two, yes, apologize to our listeners because I'm going to sound relatively conspiratorial now, but if they actually did false flag attacks that they followed through on, even on American citizens, we most likely will never know. That is not only going to be classified documentation, that is the type of shit that is written down absolutely nowhere, and that even the people executing the orders most likely didn't even know exactly what the fuck they are doing. So it's like operations that die by themselves.
Or they just burn all the fucking paperwork. But hold on.
Yeah, the paperwork and the people. Sorry. Please go on.
No, that's also true. Yeah. But I was going to say, there's two funny aspects of this particular of Northwoods. Two things that was interesting. Aside from these attacks on Americans, what they would also like an idea that was floated is if we are not going to create attacks on U.S. soil, what we can do is have Americans carry out attacks on either Jamaica or Trinidad and Tobago or like some other organization of American states country, and then afterwards blame Cuba for the attack and then use that as a... So, again, the only America can do this where they'll attack in one country, blame another country, and then invade said country. And the final cherry on top is they got so desperate to have something as an excuse to attack Cuba that when they launched the Mercury orbital flight at the time, if it wasn't successful, by the way, this was like on a whim, like, if NASA fucked up and it wasn't successful, they would blame the Cuba and they were like, the fundamental blame is with the communists and Cuba. They're the ones who sabotaged this fucking shit, and then they're going to use that as an excuse to again invade. So if anybody ever thought Colin Powell shaking that fucking bit of vanilla cake piece or something in the little perfume bottle at the UN, if you thought that was the pinnacle of clownery for the US to justify invasions, it could get a lot worse. It could be like, what, the guys who did the math did it in metric, but the astronauts used imperial, and that's why the fucking the launch failed, so it's a communist fault. Speaking of which, actually, one last side point. One of the major reasons for the U.S. not adopting the metric system was, and I quote, it was a communist conspiracy to make the United States, apply the metric standard. So that's why you guys have to say 3/8 of an inch or whatever.
Oh God,
5/16 or whatever the fuck fractions you fucking people do.
Like
every time I have to measure something, I'm like, oh my God, this is the dumbest system. Why not just use?
Your dick always sounds small. Like it always sounds small because it's so little, but when you say it in centimeters, it's like ha ha ha, you know. It's like, oh, big chunk this year.
You're what's it called, a leftist snowflake. All right, that's why you want metric. If you're a true white, blue, and red-hearted, not hard-blooded American, then you want your bread deep fried and your measurements in fucking, I don't know, not feet, in fucking, no, stones are the British ones. What other weird shit? Ounces. There's ounces, but there's fluid ounces, and they're different. Like a fluid ounce is not equal to a single ounce if it's by weight, right?
I don't even know.
See, there you go. You got me. Can you tell me how many centimeters are in a meter?
Oh, come on.
I have to take my pants down to check it.
All right, there we go. There we go. Well, that's an answer. All right. Anyways, moving on.
Here's one that I've talked about a couple times on my channel and that a lot of you probably know at this point. The fossil fuel industry knew climate change was happening and they kept it a secret. This one is, to me, one of the greatest crimes against humanity ever perpetrated because it's the number of people who have died as a result of this and who will continue to die is absurd. So let's take Exxon, for example. Back in the 70s, Exxon had gotten some reports from their scientists that what they were doing was affecting the climate. So what may be surprising now is that what they did was they invested huge sums of money to like retrofit tankers and stuff like that with scientific equipment and go around the world testing these hypotheses and claims that they were causing the climate to change. And so they spearheaded the most advanced to that point in history studies of climate change. And sure enough, the results were completely conclusive that, what we're doing is affecting the climate. It's making it warm up. And so they came up with these projections about, okay, if we continue at this pace, if we track with, if we grow at the continued rate that we assume we're going to grow, this is what it's going to look like in 50 years. And sure enough, those projections were incredibly accurate, if a little conservative. So since the 70s, they knew this was happening, and instead of taking that information to the public and working with policymakers to try to do a smooth and orderly and gradual transition to more sustainable sources of energy, they buried it. They said this is for internal eyes only. They put out some press releases saying to their internal departments saying that, hey, this is happening, but instead we're going to invest in advertising and kind of obscure this. And that's what they did. So for the last 40, 50 years, they have dumped all the money that they could have put into developing alternatives into bamboozling the public and making us feel like it's our fault that we're, not using paper straws and stuff like that. So the blood on the hands of the fossil fuel executives it's in the millions of lives, and it will continue to be. Like I've shot a documentary in the Marshall Islands. They're going underwater. They will have to evacuate. They'll have to leave simply because the sea level is rising. And also, side note, they've got like nuclear waste stored there in like a sarcophagus. And the rising tide or sea level is lifting the lid off the sarcophagus, and it's starting to leak radioactive material. So these poor people were the subject of nuclear testing, like Bikini Atoll and stuff like that, and they had to evacuate for that. And now they're going to have to evacuate permanently because their home is going underwater for the greed and profits of a handful of companies. It's just insane. And it's completely true. You can find all this information online. Like you can find the internal documents now that Exxon had put out. I'd say it's shocking, but it's really not.
The wildest to me is always that a conspiracy theory needs to be something that the government does. And a lot of people that have libertarian brain rot will go so far as to say, in the market, you don't really have rules. So what Exxon did was inside of the limits of the market and to an extent even legal, and therefore a part of the game. And we all need to play. By playing the game, we will eventually reach a point where companies like Exxon will no longer be sustainable, and for the everyday consumer, so they will go under, and more sustainable companies will rise up. But if they look at this case study in particular and thousands like it, you see that no, actually, you take a shit ton of money and you invest it into convincing people that no, everything is still fine. And then you don't even have to develop a better, or in this case, more sustainable product. You can elongate how long it takes the market to catch up with just how much, in this case, damage it's doing to the planet. So it's literally, because the people who jerk off to the market are always talking about how incredibly efficient it is. But through the invention of literally corporate propaganda, which we have termed as advertising in PR, that efficiency of, the best product always wins has absolutely gone out of the window. And in the bigger picture, this is the exact perfect case study for it, because it's not just now I'm saying just, but it's not just the exploitation of labor. It's not the lowering of product value or just stuff being cheaper and shittier and breaking down more often. We are literally talking about the one fucking planet that we can live on, and the market is not sufficient enough in preserving it from total collapse. So it's a really good example of everything that doesn't work and needs to, at the very least, be adjusted. Yeah.
Guys, what you're missing is that you need to have personal responsibility. You need to rinse out your yogurt cups, and you need to separate your fucking, the lid of your smoothie and the smoothie bottle, all right? And that is what's going to stop climate change. It's all about personal responsibility. It's about the way that you choose to consume responsibly.
Oh, God.
There's those people...
Yeah, please ignore the private jets. Please ignore the cruises. Yeah.
You know that whole movement that eats jizz all the time? Because it it creates zero waste. Yeah, and they have expensive products and shit, and you can become a jizz dispensary, so you can donate your jizz, but not to make kids, but they make smoothies out of it and shit.
I don't believe you.
Is this a fever dream? What the fuck just happened? Did I just have a stroke?
I didn't believe it either, but then I started getting some videos on YouTube of people using semen as cream, using semen in their smoothies to amp their proteins, etc.
What the fuck is this?
Usually, okay, I'm not even kidding. Okay, so you go down the rabbit hole of personal responsibility for environmentalism is the only way we can solve the situation. So you start changing your diet, you go in a certain blah, blah, blah. In my opinion, all very positive things, in the long run, we need a lot more, but very positive things in my, because, you're being a decent human being, okay. But some of them reach a absolutely batshit insane point at which they want to have almost zero carbon emissions or impossibly low carbon emissions. And, you have the cliches is, white people with dreads that never wash them, people that don't shower, motherfuckers that live literally choose to be homeless in order for their home to not have to have CO2 emissions, etc., etc. But the more wild look at me, I'm so original approach is what I've seen at least and read is trying to replace a lot of protein products, which are not even coming from animals very often, with jizz, because jizz literally costs nothing to the planet. And
hold on, just a question: are you just telling us this, or is this going in the podcast? I'm confused.
No, it can go. No, it should go in the podcast because it's showing what the extent to which propaganda coming from Exxon and other companies that are telling us that no, it's not their fault, it's our fault that shit is going fucking ham, has brought us to a point where we're eating jizz cream. Okay, ladies and gentlemen,
There we go.
we want everything to be about us to the extent that we're eating jizz cream now. Just so that we don't have class consciousness and understand where the fucking world is going. We would rather eat jizz. Like, good for us. Bravo. That is the point at which civilization is reached. I'm sorry.
What a tangent. Oh, God.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, this has been the program.
Yeah.
Good night. That was such a... Thank you, Govdi. I feel enlightened.
Why stupid? It's the perfect metaphor. It's not even funny. People eat jizz because you think that's how they're going to save the planet.
Okay, enough. Coffee. We get it. All
okay,
right.
Now to something even wilder than that. MK Ultra. Something not as serious as eating jizz. And I'm not even sure if I don't actually mean it when I said that. So most of our listeners know about MK Ultra to one extent or another, so I'll give a very fast, broad overview. On November 28th in 1953, Frank Olson, a scientist researching biological warfare for the U.S. Army, fell to his death from the 10th floor of the Manhattan Statler Hotel. Did he jump or was he pushed? 9 days before his death, Olson, who talked about leaving his job and told his wife he had made a terrible mistake, had been secretly dosed with LSD by a CIA operative. Over 20 years later, U.S. President Gerald Ford personally met with Olson's family to offer his apologies. Olson's sons are convinced that their father's death was not the result of a nervous breakdown, possibly triggered by the secret dosage of LSD. Rather, they believe that he was murdered to prevent him from exposing state secrets, a conspiracy of such magnitude that even a president had to admit to it later on in this particular case with the death of this serviceman. Sidney Gottlieb, and I'm very proud I can't pronounce it because it's a name you shouldn't remember out of anything but disgust, was basically the brain behind MK Ultra. Some people say it's some other guy. I am now giving you only shit that's like 100% confirmed. He was an immigrant, fucking immigrants, chemist of Jewish Hungarian descent, a Jew and from the Balkans. Oh my lord, this is a joke. It all really started at the whole process started at the Addiction Research Center in Lexington, Kentucky. Officially a hospital for people with drug addictions, this center laid under the joint authority of the Bureau of Prisons and the Public Health Service and kind of functioned like, a prison. So most of its inmates were extremely marginalized, powerless African Americans, and that made them what? That made them perfect test subjects. This was only the beginning. Not satisfied with, the Kentucky research that they had for quite a few years, MK Ultra branched further out. In the mid-50s, CIA operatives took note of the work of Evan Cameron, president of the American Psychological Association and the Canadian Psychiatric Association. Fucking Canadians, man. Cameron drew their attention with experiments in which he enclosed patients in small cells, put them in a drug-induced coma, and subjected them to endless repetition of recorded phrases. Cameron was looking for a technique that would enable him to, as he put it, repattern individuals, changing their attitudes and beliefs. Patients who came to Cameron for help became his unwitting test subjects instead. His work was decades later defined as almost Nazi-like and motivated by little more than ideologically self-excusing sadism. The stories are too many to count of what Gottlieb, the OG guy, had organized with other co-conspirators. One of the wildest ones from everything that I've read is having a public house where prostitutes would bring dudes and then get them tripping on LSD while the scientists analyze what would happen. In the early 70s, Gottlieb had retired from the CIA, of course. When he was outed as the man behind MK Ultra a few years later and summoned before a Senate commission, he brokered a deal which saved him from any jail time. Gottlieb quietly lived out the rest of his years raising goats in his rural house in Virginia. I can't even imagine what he did to the fucking goats if he did that to human beings. He died in 1999. Basically, he got away. A man behind fucked up shit like having mentally handicapped children being fed cereal laced with uranium and radioactive calcium, to simply weird shit like the time the CIA operatives, I think, supposedly put a listening device in a cat, but forgot that cats won't stay around, so the cat ran away. They never knew what the fuck happened to that thing. But thankfully, as we all know, that project was never successful. But, and this always irks me, if it was, we wouldn't know either.
Yeah. That's how it goes.
I was going to say, my favorite part about MK Ultra, there's actually a few parts. The first one is that the CIA director at the time, Richard Helms, he ordered that all the files relating to it be destroyed. So, and they didn't destroy everything, but they destroyed basically almost everything. So we'll never know the full extent of it. And number two, which I find absolutely hilarious, is the entire impetus for the beginning of this project was that during the Korean War, they noticed that American soldiers, a lot of them that would be captured, and this later on happened in Vietnam as well, that would be captured, would eventually either start begin informing for the either like the Chinese or the Korean or whatever other troops, like the quote unquote Reds, or they would become sympathetic to them, or they would outright join them. And the Americans, short of being like, hey, maybe those other people are actually on the right side of history, they thought they must have some like weird mind control thing that we don't know about. So let's just start microdosing LSD to people. It's this stupid like. Yeah, it's this. Oh my god! But yeah, it's absolutely horrible. A lot of the people that originated the project were either directly part of or inspired by the Japanese and Nazi German war crime, quote unquote, medical research. It wasn't research at all. It was torture. Yeah. Like Unit 731 in Japan and the Dachau concentration camp experiments in Nazi Germany, etc., etc. A lot of the people who worked within CIA cells for this stuff were either Nazi torturers or autopsy professionals or vivisectionists, excuse me, that's the word I believe. And they were out, it like dyed in the cloth fucking Nazis that just, got a US, what's it called, passport, and then just showed up. The American government and the CIA specifically had these people, these Nazis, former Nazis, who are still currently Nazis, teach the use of sarin gas against people and what had like the development of the effects of sarin gas on people and how best to dose it and all that kind of bullshit was taught to the CIA by these former Nazis. And one of the main targets that they were hoping to achieve some level of success with was Fidel Castro. They want to get something that they would know would be able to work, so then they would. So he would be one of the first people that they would target, which I find especially funny because of all the stupid shit that they tried and failed, this is up there with the exploding cigar and the fucking his beard fucking hair will fall off. All this bullshit. And by the way, this is also not mentioning all the messed up stuff in which they would basically have people in sensory deprivation rooms for months on end, only for them to come in, shock, they give them electric shocks, and then leave and keep them with sensory deprivation for a few more months afterwards, etc., etc. Absolutely like horrific things.
It's evil.
That they did.
Truly evil stuff.
Yeah, and this is only, by the way, the stuff that we know about. Other things include them seeking out impoverished drug addicts like heroin addicts, and they would experiment on them and promising them more heroin if they would comply. Yeah. They also would go to sex workers, and they would tell them it's either it will either arrest you or you end up working for us, helping us microdose these the people who would the Johns that would come and partake in the service. Amongst many other things. It was a horrible, horrible project that we haven't even scratched the surface of, but in the common public perception within the United States now, it's just some silly, they gave some like LSD to people, which is not even the beginning of how horrific it was. One more thing that I just remembered. the United States, because they were afraid, or like the CIA, because they were afraid that they could be brought to, eventually be brought for criminal prosecution because of the things that they were doing that was incredibly illegal, of which one of the most important things was violating informed consent, which was, I believe, codified after the Nuremberg trials. So it was a part of it. Basically, it's up there with fucking being a war crime if you're doing this without informed consent on people. And the United States, to avoid, or the CIA to avoid criminal prosecution, opened up black sites all over the world, mostly in Asia, to take unsuspecting people and subject them to torture, sensory isolation, temperature, extremes of temperature, changes, electroshocks, drugs, etc., and eventually a lot of them ended up dying because of this. So it leaves a pleasant taste in the mouth.
Yeah, that's a heavy one. Definitely look into MK Ultra if you're at least remotely interested in things that like the CIA and other covert operations have been up to in the U.S. and around the world. It is truly shocking, and in my experience, one of the best ways to kind of start people on a path to thinking, hey, maybe the U.S. isn't this shining city on a hill.
You know something also? JT, I would love to get your raw... I would like to get other things raw from you, but I would love to get your raw reaction to this. The amount of money that was spent on this project on Mech Ultra at the time was around $10 million, which, if you were to adjust for inflation, is almost $100 million today.
Jesus.
10 times more than all of Tibet, fucking forces and shit.
Exactly. It goes to show where the true interests of the United States government are. But the part that I love about this is $100 million tax money. This was basically the money of just regular everyday Americans going into this, rather than going to education or healthcare or helping the homeless, or hey, the countless fucking war veterans that were never taken care of in the United States, despite the fact that it's part of the civic religion of the United States to idolize the military. I mean, not to American war veterans. Part of them didn't know better. Part of them were sociopaths that just wanted to go and kill brown people. But at the end of the day, for a society that claims to care so much about their veterans and never did anything for them, this sort of money, it baffles the mind to even think about these numbers.
That's why we're number one, baby. We spend millions on our guild of necromancers.
I wouldn't be surprised. Isn't this actually true that the CIA or the United States government did research into magic? Isn't that a real thing?
Occult stuff, yeah. Same as Hitler. Yeah.
We should give them rep on that. The United States is prepared for absolutely everything. Don't they have a 150-page paper on what the U.S. needs to do in case there's a zombie apocalypse as well? Official,
aliens too.
Aliens. No, I can respect that. Or I can say, oh my God, what are you wasting your fucking money on? But to me, the key thing out of this entire conversation was what Hakeem mentioned briefly at one point 5 minutes ago, is that they learned... The only thing they learned after this massive fuck up, and not only massive fuck up, but this disgusting thing that they did to thousands of people, is they said we shouldn't get caught the next time we try to do something like this. Yeah. So they ended up creating black sites, and black sites were born pretty much out of MK Ultra and a few other colossal failures at the time. It's come on, take a fucking hint already. No.
Liberals, by the way, liberals will still, to this day, be like, oh yeah, well, we don't do that kind of stuff anymore.
Yeah.
How fucking naive. These people, I'm sorry, the only cure for this. Lobotomies, I don't know what needs to be done to maybe the liberals need LSD microdosing. I don't know.
Well, it's like that one time the ex-CIA director was on Fox News and Laura Ingraham was talking about past coups, and she's like, but we don't do that anymore, do we? And he's like, well, only for a very good cause, in the interest of democracy.
How quirky. Ooh, with the two fingers, fucking ooh. We might still do that.
Jesus Christ. He admits it on TV. He says, yes, we still coup other nations, but it's for our own good. It's like, come on.
Oh, my God. Now, I'm just going to leave with one last sentence that we can move on with Mech Ultra and all this garbage. In the official transcript, they mention the quote-unquote perfect subjects that they could go out for, and they list them as mental patients, prisoners, drug addicts, and prostitutes. And according to the officer that put it together, he put within brackets, people who could not fight back.
Yeah.
So this is the United States. If you want to ever see what the true image, the true face of that criminal empire is, it's that. People who could not fight back. So fuck the United States, fuck the US.
Obviously, JP will cut all of this.
Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And people can infer what was said. Magba America. That's what was said. All right. Anyways, moving on. Is it my turn? Our next beautiful conspiracy theory, which was a little bit more out there in one way and a little bit more insidious in another, is something called Operation Condor. Now, I think a lot of people, particularly on the left, should know or would already know about Operation Condor, but for those who are unaware, it was a US-backed official campaign. This was a thing that was backed on every level of the American government in collaboration with basically every far-right or fascist right-wing government in Latin America for campaigns of massive political repression and state terror, kidnappings, assassinations, and on. My favorite part about this is, again, leading back to the thing that JT just mentioned about the ex-director who was like, oh yeah, no, we still coup governments. If you want to just get a short list of some of the coups that were directly supported and instigated by the United States, the Stroessner government in Paraguay in 1954, which is a fascist government, was brought to power off the back of Operation Condor. The military junta in Brazil in 1964 was again as a result of Condor. Hugo Banzer in Bolivia in 71 was also as a result of this. In Uruguay, the military dictatorship in 1973 was also as a result of this. The rise of Pinochet and the illegal overthrow of the democratically elected government of Salvador Allende.
You said illegal, right? Because I heard you say legal.
Yes, illegal. No, illegal. Fuck.
Apologies, my friend. No, it's okay.
Yeah, no, it's perfectly fine. That was in 1973. That was also as a result of Operation Condor. In Peru, the dictatorship, the fascist dictatorship in Peru in 1975 was also as a result of Operation Condor. The Argentinian military junta in 1976 was also as a result of this. I could go on, but if this isn't enough of a point to be like, oh wow, maybe the United States isn't pretty cool. Isn't it just a quirky little thing that every government the United States will like to put in power just happens to be a military fascist dictatorship? Isn't that just what a quirky little thing? What a nice little
weird coincidence.
What a interesting little personality, fucking Jesus
so
Christ.
Quirky.
All right. Yeah, it is. What a little quirk. By the way, if you want to know what included this operation, it included cooperation of secret police across all these countries. It included lists of basically everybody. If you're students, if you're a doctor, it doesn't. Civil servants, it doesn't matter what you are. Massive lists of people and their political motivations, and if they went to this meeting or that meeting, all this bullshit. So basically, all the stuff that they claimed the East German secret police did, the American government does to Americans and people all over the world to this day, and they supported this happening in Latin America as back as the 60s, and even before that, actually. They supported and directly trained Latin American military and paramilitary and police forces in how to kidnap and assassinate and, quote-unquote, to disappear people. They trained them in torture methods. Not only did they train them in torture methods, but every subsequent American president knew of the extent of disappearances and assassinations and the torture that would take place, and they would give the go-ahead. They would give the what's it called, the direct approval. The American politicians and business leaders and people of the entire upper echelon of American society would meet with these criminals and torturers and dictators, these fascists, shake hands with them, go to their weddings and go to their banquets and all this kind of stuff. They would be supported as bulwarks against communist dictatorship and friends of democracy and all this fucking nonsense. Of course, our favorite, what's it called, double of the devil, fucking Kissinger, is directly played a hand in almost all these in setting up almost all of this. And my favorite part is Kissinger was the one who, in a note to several of these Latin American governments, thought that death squads weren't being formed quickly enough.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
So if you ever want to, by the way, just hazard a guess, who was the primary recipient of all this repression? Just hazard a guess. I wonder. I wonder who it could be. I wonder, possibly. Of course, it was communists. It was communists, the socialists, trade union leaders, peasant leaders, everybody who wanted to improve the daily life of average, everyday people. Were the people who were
targeted
directly. Yeah, exactly. By the way, you know what's interesting is there's an interesting French and also Israeli connection to this, which the two a settler.
I can smell the room.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I'm like, oh, I wonder. Wow, what a neato, isn't that? But yeah, if you
also,
want to know,
fun fact, throwback to one of our episodes with Alan McLeod, there is some evidence to suggest that Tucker Carlson, of all people, was involved with some of the Contras, which is very, very interesting, and it just goes to show how many CIA flunkies end up working for state TV.
Yeah, no, exactly right. And these people are, if like a former KGB guy was was a newscaster, incredibly popular in the Soviet Union, they would never live that. This would be a thing to this day. They'd be like, oh, but what about this newscaster that's ex-KGB that would spread all this propaganda on Soviet television? Oh my God, you would never live it down as a communist. But this shit didn't happen in the Soviet Union. This shit happens and happened and still happens in the United States and its allies. By the way, if you guys want to know or have a rough idea of the amount of people who are killed, it's very hard to know because none of this stuff has been declassified, and we just have kind of the bad archives of these dictatorships that didn't keep records. They didn't care; they just killed people and then threw them in mass graves. So it's hard to tell exactly how many people died, but it's believed that nearly 500,000 people were arrested. Over 50,000 people were killed, and this is, by the way, not wartime or this is clandestine assassinations and stuff like that. Think about this for a second. This isn't like a mass movement that raised an army that met with the government and there was like massacres. No, this was like some guy knocks on your door and puts 2 bullets in you and then walks away. 50,000
individual murders.
Yeah. Ridiculous amounts of people killed. There's between 20 and 40,000 people who are quote unquote disappeared, which is another way of saying killed. So the real amount of people who died were nearly 100,000 people.
Sorry for interrupting you. For context, in the quote unquote Ukrainian war from the beginning, around 5,000 civilians have died up until this point. This is a hardcore war with fucking HIMARS missiles and fucking tanks and shit. And you heard how many Hakim cited outside of open war.
And my favorite interesting, like I'll note one person who died because a lot of people died, and it wouldn't be fair to just to the audience or all these people deserve to be remembered, and all these. By the way, a lot of people were killed. We still don't know where they ended up. We don't know where their graves are. And a lot of these people were students, by the way. Some of them as young as like 15 and 16 years old. Some of them even younger, by the way. But I'm not even going to get into that. I'm going to highlight one person, because of how ridiculous it is. There is one girl, her name was Dagmar Hagelin. She is a Swedish-Argentinian girl who happened to be friends with a person who was a suspected radical. So this happened in Argentina, by the way, in the 70s, in 77, I believe. The secret police basically showed up to the house of this guy who was a friend of this girl, who was a suspected radical, and they, beat him up and tortured him, all that kind of stuff, and he apparently let up that the next day he was expecting a visit from another radical. So they're like, okay, now they have some lead on some person. And this girl, who just happens to be a friend, who wasn't a radical, she just happened to be a friend of this person, decided to, on a whim, show up to this guy's house. Right? When she showed up to this guy's house, they want to arrest her, and then she didn't know what was going on, so she started running, so they just gunned her down in the street. God. And the guy who was responsible for this, only after the Swedish state had to get involved 30 years later, was he brought to justice, and he was, I think, he was sent to prison, basically, which is not enough for all the other people that he's killed. Also, a side note,
disgusting.
Very interesting that a lot of the people that were directly involved either in the secret police of this or even in the military dictatorships, had German last names with very unsavory connections to other German, some a particular, you know. So,
but give the Germans guns, you know. Give the Germans guns.
No. We need to remilitarize. All right, Germany.
Absolutely.
Anyways, my point being is that this girl was 17 years old, going to visit a friend's house, and was gunned down on the street because of being this is how fragile fascist governments are, that they're this they're so horrifically terrified of a 17-year-old that they have to murder them without due trial or anything in the street, because God forbid this person might be a radical or a communist. By the way, when they gunned her down, I think I misremembered. When they gunned her down before they captured her after she ran away, they took her to a torture center where certain things happened. You can use your imagination, and then she was killed. So excuse me, I misremembered. There's another 17-year-old with a similar story, but they weren't Swedish, that this happened to. Anyways, you get my point. This is the face of the American empire. Always remember, whenever you see Joe Biden and he's like, oh, America is back with democracy, we're leaders of the free world. This is what they were doing in back rooms, meeting and shaking hands with the most despicable of humanity. So yes,
a lot of people listening would say, okay, but what about all those South American governments that were doing that together with the U.S.? What about this Eastern European country, this Middle Eastern country, this Asian country, this, that? They also do very fucked up shit. The U.S. is, if they had the same money as the U.S., they would do fucked up shit on the same level, etc., etc. And honestly, okay, let's accept that argument. But none of those fucking countries say that they are paragons of freedom and democracy, and they're the only place that doesn't, quote unquote, deal in back rooms, that doesn't do that to their own citizens or foreign citizens, that is somehow playing the game far more ethically than any other place on planet Earth, etc., etc. Okay, sure, throw that argument at us. Other governments, quote unquote, do it too. But at least the citizens of those other governments and those other governments themselves, I'm not excusing them, but at least they're relatively open about being pieces of fucking shit. The hypocrisy of the US when it comes to acting abroad and domestically in such a despicable manner is because it has brainwashed its own population, and I genuinely think even itself that it doesn't want to accept what it sees in the fucking mirror, And that's what annoys motherfuckers,
By the way, it gets worse. I have other, things, quote unquote, conspiracies, but I'm not gonna you guys take your things, and then I'll take mine later. So JT, you're up.
Okay, all right. Let's see if I can make this a little less depressing. All right, so we all are familiar with advertising, and we're surrounded with billboards, especially here in the United States. Everything is sold to us all the time. So one conspiracy that a lot of people have is that they're trying to turn us into mindless drones through the TV, and in a way that is kind of true, and it all comes down to mostly one dude whose name was Edward Bernays. This guy was he's considered the great grandpappy of advertising, and his goal was to basically gain control of the minds of the average American. They wanted to determine what the base psychological needs were that Americans had in the back of their mind, and manipulate them into doing stuff, to manipulate them specifically into buying consumer goods. And fun fact, Bernays was Sigmund Freud's nephew, so he was kind of leaning on his uncle's thoughts on the subconscious to develop his own methods. And what's interesting about this, this guy he's a propagandist. He was a propagandist. And when you typically think of propagandists, we're all propagandists. We distribute information based on our ideology. But this guy, his only ideology was, how do I get people to buy cereal or shoes or whatever? His whole thing was not to forward any movement or change the world in any meaningful way, but just to get people to open their wallets more willingly, which is fascinating. And one
Sorry, just before you continue, I just want to add one thing. This always reminds me of the picture where it was a on the sides of Soviet buildings from like the 80s, and it was quote unquote advertisement, Soviet advertisement, and it was a image of three women. And it was like a stylized art on the side of these huge housing buildings. And one of them was an artist, one of them was a scientist, and one of them was a doctor. Like one of them was looking like a test tube, and the other one had like a doctor's, the lab coat and everything. And then in like 1993, it was just Pepsi Cola.
Jesus Christ.
So it just goes to show what the Soviet or socialist governments want to advertise and what the capitalism wants to. Sorry.
Exactly. Yeah. So he worked with another guy called Paul Mazur, I don't know how you pronounce his last name, who said, "We must shift America from a needs to a desires culture. People must be trained to desire, to want new things, even before the old have been entirely consumed. We must shape a new mentality. Man's desires must overshadow his needs," which is pretty transparent. But
what if my desire is to turn Bernays into the sauce he's named after?
But Bernays himself, it said in 1928, and I think this is where it becomes a little insidious, and it becomes clear just how his goals were strictly that he wanted to control people's minds. And here's his quote. "The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government that is the true ruling power of this country. We are governed, our minds molded, our tastes formed, our ideas suggested, largely by men we have never heard of. In almost every act of our daily lives, we are dominated by the relatively small number of persons who pull the wires which control the public mind." So this guy was like the OG mind control sadist. Like this was back in the 20s that he was experimenting with this stuff. And he wrote a book called Propaganda, which you can find, and it's very highly rated. Like it's well written, and it outlines his methods and stuff. So if you're interested in learning how this philosophy works, because it's still employed to this day with corporations, they're fine-tuning his methods to this day to sell stuff at a more breakneck pace. I'd encourage you to check out his book, and it'll give you at least a little bit of insight into the mind of the enemy, of the people trying to prey on you.
The book is very good. I read it back in the day, and Bernays kind of reaches a point of semi-class consciousness, even with the quote that you read out previously, but he just fully goes, okay, so I need to be a part of the ruling class. If I don't want to get fucked, I need to be the one who fucks. Right. Typical, bootstraps type of methodology.
It's you realize how sadistic it is when you think about who their ideal target audience is, and it's the same today. And I'm sure Nick, you can tell me who the most valuable and lucrative audience is for advertising.
Kids.
Yeah, it's kids, exactly. And if you can get them young, you'll have a consumer for life. If you can build those, quote unquote relationships with the consumer, that's, 60, 70, 80 years of people buying cornflakes because it's their favorite, because they've watched the commercials on TV when they were a kid. It's really sick.
It's not just, the commercial that you see on a billboard or on TV. It's all advertising from when he became super influential was a all-round package, bombarding everyone with information throughout every funnel that they can find that you interact with on a daily basis. So if you're running one particular campaign, you want that campaign to be in the newspapers, on the TV, on the billboard in front of the school, on the leaflets, in the mall, being put on the wind wipers of your car. That's like more direct stuff. But then what JT perfectly outlined it, and his genuine kind of brilliance and the brilliance of capitalists of that day, respect your enemy, etc., comes from is that they understood that if we only concentrate on use value of products, people will buy only a certain set and a certain number of things, and once they satisfy their material existence, the lower tiers of the Maslow pyramid, they will be like, okay, I'm fine with this, and they will pursue some greater joys in life and forget about going to the mall every other motherfucking day and needing to buy a new suit, a new t-shirt, a new car every 3 years, make their house a bit bigger, a bit flashier, etc. They understood understood that the true purpose of life is not to consume. Actually, they understood that once people get tired of simply consuming, they pursue some greater things. So how do we make sure that they keep consuming? Do we increase the quality of the product? Okay, from time to time, sure. But what if we can make them think that finding greater purpose can also be achieved through what? Through consumption. So they created, a society of desires where your internal personal identity needs to be constantly communicated outwards to everyone that you're surrounded by you showing them what subculture you're in. What economic class you're in, the expensiveness of your clothes, how your clothes look like, if we take fashion, etc., etc. What your political beliefs are. You can, when we look at fashion, you can show all of that off through the products that you buy and that you put on your body. Now expand that to absolutely every single industry that you can think of. Again, they managed to say use value of products is finite. But if you make the motherfucker think that he cannot be himself and that he cannot be a true elevated member of society without constantly showing that off through the things that he, she, they own, then you're gonna make a lot of motherfucking money. And that's why no matter, people think that advertising is sometimes very direct, and a lot of it, the cheap shit, absolutely is. But true, genuine world building happens to a certain extent subconsciously. Obviously, he was very inspired by his uncle, and he was very successful in it. Because even, I don't know, boys, you can tell me if you're like this or not, but even people like the three of us, which I believe have a decent amount of class consciousness and a decent understanding of how insane hyper-consumerism really fucking is, we still get trapped in it from time to time because it's the ideology of the land, quote unquote. And I feel uncomfortable if I'm outside and I have a stain on my fucking shirt. It's a stain on my shirt. I'm not that, but I feel uncomfortable. It's not ironed. I feel uncomfortable. It looks shitty and low quality. I feel uncomfortable. I buy something expensive, relatively branded. I know it's insane. I feel fucking cool. Even though I know it's insane, I feel fucking cool. I want a nice motherfucking car. I like flashy fucking gold on my fingers. I know it's insane, but it makes me feel very comfortable with myself. And they tapped the need for self-expression, but they turned it into, you want self-expression, buy my fucking thing. And respect to our enemy. This is, again, very changeable, and we will change this in the future of the world. But this conspiracy just let me finish. What JT started with, the conspiracy that oh my God, they're trying to control our minds, is stupid because they're not trying to. They've done it a long time ago.
Yeah.
I was just something I'd like to add is something interesting you mentioned right now about the power of advertising and how even though you know better, it still quote unquote feels nice to get the thing. I'm reminded of the movie The Irony of Fate, which is a Soviet movie from 1976. It's a romantic comedy kind of type. It's a very good movie, and it's now like a Christmas tradition.
I fucking love that film. You said it in English. Oh, that's such a good fucking film. Yeah, sorry. Yep.
Yeah, and across almost all post-Soviet countries, at Christmas time, the family gets together and watches this movie. I don't know why, but it's a very good movie. By the way, like side topic, we're gonna do an episode on censorship, and I spoke with the guys briefly about this. If I was personally a Soviet censor, I wouldn't have allowed this movie to be made. I don't think. Which really goes to show how, I don't want to use the word liberal, but how open they were with how much they allowed the Soviet system to be criticized, unlike what the Americans would have to believe, or the West
same
have
apartments and everything.
Yeah, exactly right. But anyways, my point being is I watched this movie with my father in like the end of my, I think, third year of med school. I remember after a very big exam, it was a kind of like a shifting moment in my life. It was a very important thing, and it was one of those rare moments that me and my father could actually bond, because we have very few of those, sadly. And we watched this movie, And there's a scene in which one of the guys, the guy, he has a Christmas gift for his woman, and she gets him an electric shaver, and he gets her a perfume that was imported from Paris. And I was like, oh, and the reason that it was so, because the Soviet perfume industry did exist and it was actually fairly developed. But the very fact this was advertised in Western magazines and it was from France and it's all like bougie and all that kind of shit. She swooned over this fact. And I remember my father looked at this and he like just muttered under his breath. He was like, "This is what destroyed you." I mean, like the Soviets. He was like, "This bullshit is." And I just this moment just is very fixated in my mind. And this is why I hate advertising to such a. No offense, you up, Nick.
Oh, no,
you have to eat.
I'm only learning the methods of the enemy. I'm far from another.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. But like when you see what happened for like in Cuba, when you go and you don't see billboards fucking advertising, objectify women to advertise fucking, I don't know, selling bananas or some stupid shit. You see a sign that says there are millions of children that are going to sleep hungry today. Not a single one of them is Cuban, for example, something like that. Like something that makes you proud of your country,
and yet it still reached them. It still reached them. When my parents went to Cuba, in the hotel when they were leaving, literally everybody was begging them, "You give me the rest of your deodorant or the shampoo or whatever because it's branded Nivea or something, and they can resell it or they can use them themselves and feel like, oh my god, I'm a bit better than the other guy because I have this." Because even no matter how beautiful of a society you're building, these ideas that Bernays and other motherfuckers have created have become so global that they're. Please continue. Sorry, but you know what the fuck I'm going to say. Yeah.
No, exactly right. Yeah. So this is something that we'll probably make a dedicated episode on. But the concept of and the how horrible and how deeply penetrated advertising has been to the modern human psyche has damaged not even like just society in general, but also it's something that will have to be content with very intelligently under socialism. Yeah, but that was just
you really can't just because a lot of commies say sorry for I'm not just adding on. I'm not
go ahead, please.
Because it's a passionate conversation. Big mistake for any potential communist revolutionary listening to this. Please don't go full on. Oh, now we again have only one type of product for every single thing. You will not be able to fund any fucking movement that way because people are just used to having 7 types of genes. You can't go back. You need to adjust it to a socialist mode of production.
Yeah, that's true. But what's interesting is nowadays with the path that what we've learned from the Soviet experiment and the new paths that have been developed by the other socialisms that currently exist, there is at least some idea of the possibility of this. We no longer exist in the only 10,000 products that are planned by hand anymore. We have supercomputers and all like that. So it will be different this time around. It will be better. Even though the first attempt was a smashing fucking success, given the limitations. But yeah, sorry. I heavily derailed. Excuse me.
No, you didn't.
No, that was beautiful. This is exactly the kind of conversation I wanted to have about this because it's super important, and I feel like people don't really think about it that much.
Yeah,
they don't because they think it's normal. They think that's human nature. Wanting lots of shit, hoarding shit is just natural.
Yeah.
By the way, just funnily enough, the Ukrainian government now has banned this movie because it was produced by. It's just a stupid.
Wow.
Just a stupid.
Why
by
this
the way,
movie?
now it's like
what? It's the most inoffensive, the fuck Christmas thingy that only hardcore commies like us are gonna be like, oh my god, they're making fun. You got the free apartment. You're making fun of it. They both look the same. Triggered. Yeah. But
not only do you know why the reason's even more stupid than this?
Why?
One of the actresses in the movie, by the way, this movie was made in the mid-70s. One of the actresses made a Russian government statement in 2012 or something, right?
Man.
Like 50 years afterwards, after this movie was produced, and the Ukrainian government's like, oh, it's this movie contradicts the interests of our national security. So now it's
great. So what are people gonna watch
next
New
level
Year's,
grudge holding.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Imagine if we applied that scrutiny to Kanye West, bro.
Yeah. Anyways, can I bring it back to depression with my with my examples?
Yeah.
All right. So the next thing, which was, by the way, apparently
this was very depressing as well.
I'm sorry. Well, to bring down the mood even further, this is also considered to be a conspiracy theory. Oh, this never fucking happened until it came out that it happened. The use of Nazis after World War II as spies, recruited by the U.S. government. And there's one example I would like to highlight, because there's so many of them, they're all horrible, but this guy is such a example of a piece of shit that he's the prototypical, he's the example. This guy, his name is Alexandras I don't know how the fuck to pronounce this. Lileikis. Lileikis. He's Lithuanian. If you look up his fucking picture, this dude is the spitting image of an evil motherfucker. He looks like the sort of... Do you know what he looks like? He looks like the sort of professor that when you go into your exam, he's going to fail you right away. This is the guy.
Oh, wow,
I've sent the picture. This is the dude, doesn't he? He looks like
he looks mean.
Yeah, he looks like a dickhead. Now, this guy was indeed a dickhead. If you don't know, this dude was a Lithuanian born in 1907 or so. He went to law school in Lithuania, and then afterwards, when Lithuania joined and became part of the Soviet Union, he fled to Germany to join a particular small movement that was going on in the area at the time. I think you guys know what I'm talking about. He was very pro-Nazi, this dude. Very, very pro-Nazi. And he was a significant hater of what he referred to as Judeo-Bolshevism. Yes, our favorite fucking...
classic.
Exactly.
We need a soundboard that says classic.
Phrase.
Yeah, oh yes.
Honestly, we need a soundboard that just says Judeo-Bolshevism, for fuck's sake. Anyway,
Judeo-Bolshevism.
So this dude, basically, he had a short stint as a member of the secret police in Lithuania before he came to the pre-Soviet Lithuanian secret police before the Soviet Union before Lithuania joined the Soviet Union, and he went then to Nazi Germany, and then when the Nazis invaded the Soviet Union, he went back to Lithuania, reorganized the secret police along the Gestapo lines, and basically with directives from Nazi Germany, but also his own stuff that he wrote, he wanted to create a force that would weed out, quote unquote, all Jews and communists from Lithuania. And he specifically said that if you are a Jew in hiding, or you're a non-Jew, but you help Jews, or you are a communist, you're all Jews. It doesn't matter. Jesus Christ. And
honest about
Jews,
the irrationality.
all communists. Yeah, and if you're all Jews, you're also all communists. And if you're Jews and communists, you should be killed.
But doesn't it cancel itself out? Communist and Jew, then you're an Aryan, you get a pass.
Yeah. Now, honestly, by the way, not only this, but he was an enthusiastic organizer of, what are they called in English? Where you just have a ragtag team of people like from the village, and they're just like, we want to kill Jews too.
Pogroms?
Yeah, kind of like a pogrom, but he would get these bands of people that he would organize, just regular people, to organize into basically anti-Semitic and anti-communist murder, like death squads. Basically lynchings. And these people have been estimated to murder 70,000 Jews in one city alone. In one city alone. Not only this, but he was directly he would get the papers on his desk, and he would sign on all of them, like these 10,000 Jews, kill them, yes, and signature. These 10,000 Jews, kill them, his signature, and so on and so forth. If you just need to know, this guy was a thorough piece of shit. After the war, when the Soviets were rapidly advancing on Nazi Germany, this guy decided, you know what, he saw the writing on the walls, and in 1944 he escaped to Germany. He changed his appearance and everything and came to Germany to just try to be a quote-unquote displaced person. And then when the war ended, he immediately went to American forces, and he was like, oh, I'm a poor little oppressed dissident, can you guys help me out? And the American government, the American forces, and the CIA, or what became of the CIA at the time, directly knew of all his activities. They knew he was he organized secret police in pre-Soviet Lithuania. He knew his actions in Germany. He knew that he was directly responsible for the death of tens of thousands, almost 100,000 Jews actually in Lithuania. They knew all of this, right? But when in his official document, CIA document that authorized him entering into the US, they wrote that there is apparently no derogatory information on him. Right? God. So, show me another guy who can kill 10,000 people or 100,000 people based solely on ethnic self-identification, and there would be no derogatory information.
That's okay with us,
anyway,
you know?
Yeah. Not only was he saved by the CIA, taken away from what the Soviets would have done, which would have rightly hanged him for the piece of shit and war criminal that he was.
Yeah.
They took him out of there. They brought him to the U.S. They set him up in like fucking Maryland or something in a cozy little fucking suburban house. And they gave him a stipend, so he got like your tax money, basically American tax money, paying this piece of shit salary. And he was used to recruit Lithuanian spies in East Germany and all this kind of stuff. And he directly, out of his own volition, but also with the help of the CIA, managed to help his Nazi buddies, particularly Lithuanian Nazi collaborators, out of the former Soviet area and help them get American citizenship and CIA jobs as well. So, he doesn't forget his own, apparently.
Yeah. We're good at that. We're really good at hiring Nazis for our projects.
Yeah.
Like NASA was full of them. Everything.
Isn't that so weird? Isn't that so weird? What kind of a government that claims to be the number one purveyor and supporter of democracy and human rights? Why would there be so many Nazis? I can't fathom it personally. Okay. Anyways,
probably nothing.
So in the end, this dude, by the way, there was an official investigation launched many decades after, 50 years afterwards, that basically just came across the fact that this dude killed tens of thousands of people by his own hand. And the CIA then went on record saying, "Oh, we didn't know any of this. We had no idea. We know that what minute JT took a shit today, but we didn't know that this guy killed 100,000 Jews. We didn't know it." Anyways, so basically, this guy was not excommunicated. What's the word? Extradited. I think that's the term in English. To Lithuania. No, he wasn't extradited. Excuse me. He went on his own volition. He went and flew to Lithuania just to fucking live it up, I guess, after the fall of the Soviet Union, or the illegal dissolution of the Soviet Union. And in the late 90s and 98 or so, he was charged with genocide by the Lithuanian government, which, by the way, to this day still celebrates other Nazi collaborators. So it's like Latvia and Estonia. So it was very interesting that they chose to single out this one guy. But anyways, so he appeared in court and he was about to be sentenced, but then sadly justice couldn't be served because he died of a heart attack before the trial was over.
Hold on. This man died of a heart attack and worked for the CIA?
Question mark.
New conspiracy.
Yes. By the way, do you want to know the what's it called? The best part about it is that
he died.
The guy who was he should have died way earlier. He should have been fucking hung in 1944. This piece of shit. But anyways, this guy, when he died, he had apparently an official funeral that was attended by many radical Lithuanian nationalists and fascists and Nazis and all that kind of shit, to give him to honor him and his efforts against the Judeo-Bolsheviks, all this, the same shit that happens in Ukraine now, the same exact fucking image. And this dude was protected and directly supported financially and in other ways by the U.S. government and by the CIA. And you want to know the pinnacle, the absolute cherry on top? There is one of the few images surviving of him in service is him in front of him in his shitty little Nazi uniform that, by the way, is very ill-fitting on him, so this beta fuck, right? And behind him is just a band of Jews that are all tied together. And of course, they were subsequently all murdered after this image was taken. And this is one of the images that, by the way, was in the official archive of the CIA for this dude. But again, the CIA is oh, we don't know. He was just having fun. This is just a little game of fucking hacky sack. What are you talking about?
Oh,
right? This is what this guy was doing.
Vibes.
Yeah, I'm sorry for this.
We checked the vibes.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly right. But yeah, by the way, you want to know the best part about it is because the Nazis, when the Soviets were rapidly advancing, the Nazis started burning all their paperwork, right? Yeah. And one of the few pieces of paper that still had a signature left was one execution notice for 75 Jews, and this is the only one that it has survived to this day. So this was the official charge, and he used this in his thing, oh, but I only killed 75 people allegedly.
Wow.
Even though he killed tens of thousands, if not more. So yeah, this was a very messy delivery. I apologize, but
no, that's okay.
Yeah, there's a lot to deliver. But yes, so this is the guy that the United States decided was a good fit for their national security services and other and other.
What an asset.
Yes. By the way, the best part about it is there are certain tabloids as well as some official Lithuanian, publications and whatnot that go kind of on being like, oh, but he was a good anti-Soviet, freedom fighter, like he was a complicated figure. So just yeah.
Oh man. Well, you were right. This was another depressing one. So thank you for that. Do we want to end on a positive note and maybe say one modern conspiracy theory that we all believe in?
Yeah, sure. Go on.
All right,
sure.
I'll go first.
Okay.
All right, so easy one. Epstein did not kill himself. But let's go further than that. Epstein himself was CIA. I think it's very useful to have somebody like that, and the CIA has used in the past evidence of pedophilia among powerful people, or even, okay, I'm not going to say that. Not so powerful people, I'm not going to give examples, to have dirt on them, basically, to be able to control them and say, look, if you don't cooperate with us, we're going to make this information public and ruin you. So I think the fact that Epstein was allowed to operate for all this time and with so many high-profile guests on his awful little island, I think to me that indicates that he was at least tolerated by the CIA, if not part of their operation.
You stole mine. That's the one I would motherfucking said.
Hey,
Lamau.
Yeah, it's an obvious one, I think. All right, Hakeem, give us one. Give us one that you think.
Okay, wait. One that we all believe? Fuck, you're putting me on the spot. I didn't prepare this.
No, one that just you believe. Like that was the one that I believe. Actually, and I guess you got those too.
This is my personal opinion as Hakeem, not the opinion of the Deprogram. When it comes to 9/11, I won't go as far as to say as it was like the United States government did it on themselves. I don't think I'll say that much. But listen, no, hold on. I have a very hard time believing the United States, the single strongest military power, at a point when it was unipolar world. They were the only people on the stage. I have a very hard time believing that their extensive military and national security apparatus could not know of either an attack that was being planned, or when the planes were hijacked and that they went way off course and that they were clearly going to New York when they weren't supposed to go there, and they were going to go hit two fucking planes, two buildings, all that kind of stuff, and there was going to be an attack on the Pentagon, etc., etc., etc. I have a very hard time believing that the United States government didn't at least know. I'm not so sure if they themselves did it. Who knows? But if I believe that they knew and they let it happen because they knew it would allow for they'd sacrificing American lives, because then they would be able to use it as justification for their military adventurism in Iraq and Afghanistan. I don't think it's very controversial to say that this is not beneath the American government to do. Now, do I have any evidence of this? I don't. I've never cared enough to look into it.
That's how you believe a conspiracy theory. Yeah. Hell yeah.
There you go. I love the fucking minefield, how I navigated that shit. Oof. Oh, boy. I'm sweating, boy.
Spicy. Well done.
All right. You go, Nick.
I genuinely don't really... I think the opioid epidemic in the U.S. and everything that happened with Oxycontin and shit, the corporations absolutely knew about it, but I don't see it happening without the government's not approval, but intentional silence as it was being, as it was spreading across the country.
Right.
I mean, the crack epidemic was a thing. It was an actual government program practically, so I'm not surprised. I wouldn't be surprised, The only thing that would make me think kind of less is I don't know if the American government would want to do white people that badly. All right, and with all that said, I hope we didn't thoroughly depress you with all these... I hope that you guys had a great time listening to this. We couldn't have done any of this stuff, of course, again, without the support of our lovely patrons. That's why you're not hearing me say, oh, fucking Audible, go listen to fucking J.K. Rowling fingering her asshole for 20 minutes. You can get a free audiobook. Oh, the only reason you're not hearing this garbage or Dollar Shave Club and talking about shaving your balls is because of our great and lovely Patreon supporters. So thank you to all you great people. Without you guys, we wouldn't be able to do it. Otherwise, we'll be back with something hopefully slightly more uplifting the next time around. This has been the Deprogram. I'm Hakeem.
I'm JT.
And I'm Yugopnik. 9/11, Joe Biden, wake up.
Steel beams, jet fuel? Is that the meme?
Oh, yeah, the camel beams.
Epstein drove the fucking plane.